Hi, this is Jeremy Katz. I'm here for Ogilvydo, and I'm here with Cory Doctorow. Cory is a well-known science fiction writer, the editor of Boing Boing, the co-editor of Boing Boing, and an extraordinarily well-known thinker about all things digital and activist for free copyright. Is that accurate?
I'm an advocate for a free and fair internet, which means copyright reform.
I like that. Anyway, Cory has been kind enough to give us a few minutes of his time, despite having flown in just last night, and the fact that he's been on 2 panels already today, so we'll be fast. Thank you very much again.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Can you tell me a little bit about your vision for the future? And you said something provocative about hope, and I'm wondering if you remember it well enough to repeat it.
Sure. You know, I'm a science fiction writer, which means that I understand that predictions about the future are silly. And science fiction writers who believe their own predictions about the future are they're inhaling their own farts, right? They're it's like drug dealers who sample their own product. It never ends well. But I think that science fiction has a role to play in relation to the future. I think that science fiction writers imagine lots and lots of futures. And then there's this kind of winnowing process that's what is it that scares or excites people based on their feelings about the present, and those become resonant. So why are we still talking about the Matrix 25 years later, even though as a prediction it's very silly to imagine that we'll be turned into batteries for AIs? Well, because we're surrounded by giant transhuman organisms of our own making, called corporations, to whom we appear to be a kind of species of gut flora, to be flushed if we become inconvenient otherwise, to be not thought of particularly. So rather than being optimistic or pessimistic about the future, which is, again, a mug's game because it's a prediction and because it makes no difference to your behavior. If you're optimistic about the future, you get up every morning and do everything you can to ensure that the internet is a force for a free and fair and better society. And if you're pessimistic about the future, you do everything you can to stop the internet from becoming a mechanism for surveillance and control. And it all comes to the same thing. So rather than optimism or pessimism, I'm a believer in hope. Hope is why, if your ship sinks, you tread water. Not because most people who tread water get picked up, but because everyone who got picked up treaded water. And it's a necessary but insufficient condition for attaining something better. And the thing about hope is it gives you strength for the people around you. So we're not at the end of surveillance, but we are definitely at the end of indifference to surveillance. From here on in, people only become more concerned about the way that the internet is headed. And so those are like people who can't kick for themselves when the ship goes down. And if there was someone like that you loved, you'd put their arms around your neck, and hope would give you the strength to kick twice as hard. And there are people around us who need us to carry them through this discussion about privacy, when right now it seems like it's a bit fringy, and until it becomes more central to them too.
You've written for a web publication for a number of years now, a web publication that began as a print publication.
Yeah.
You see, and you mentioned earlier that you need a lot of feeds, a lot of inputs into your feed in order for it to make over your mental transom, I think you put it. Mm-hmm. It sounds a lot like what we always used to talk about in the old days of interruption advertising, the repetition of a message that has to go on.
Sure.
Are we a low attention span society, a species, or has something fundamentally changed with the digital age?
No, I think that there's like a common pattern with sources of information, mm-hmm. which is that a source of information that's new and has things that are interesting to you necessarily starts without all that much, right? It's the kind of thing you can digest in one go. So if you're interested in a new hobby that's just emerging, say amateur robotics, there, if you're lucky, will be one amateur robotics magazine, and you can read it cover to cover every month. And then over time, the feed becomes more voluminous, right? More people get interested in it, it gets bigger, and so on. And what you start to do is, instead of being deterministic, if there's an article about robotics you read it this month, you become probabilistic. You have lots and lots of feeds, and you skim them and skim them and skim them, and every now and again, you see enough of something that eventually one of the presentations of it snags your attention and you ingest it. It's not because it's the same thing over and over again, it's because it's the same thing presented in different ways from different angles by different people, and that brings it to your attention and helps you kind of ingest it. So it's not that advertisers showing us the same logo over and over again eventually kind of bakes it into the back of our brain. That may happen too, but rather that there are more things than we can conceivably pay attention to, even to the extent that our vision is really just a 2-degree cone with a whole bunch of interpolated information that's not what we're actually seeing. So there's more than we can possibly take in, and if you want to take something in, if there's more of it, the likelihood of you taking it in goes up.
There was talk this morning about how we have not yet really seen the full impact of the digital revolution. It seems that, I think Ronan it was, who mentioned that we've had the agricultural revolution and the industrial revolution, now we've got the digital revolution. I wonder if instead this is more similar to the printing press, which had its impacts felt 400 years later. When do you think we'll see the societal changes fully emerge from the digital revolution that's going on right now?
Well, I don't think we will. I mean, I think we're still trying to come to grips with alcohol, and that's been around for, thousands of years, right? I think that we will have an ever-shifting relationship with information technology. I do think that, like, if you want to think about a kind of parable about where the future goes, that what we see with technology is it lowers the cost of working together. And so we can do things that are quite ambitious without having to erect a lot of the kind of organizational infrastructure that we needed historically to make that happen. So you can become a terrorist cell with just a little bit of internet and crypto. You can build an encyclopedia with the kind of organizational nous we used to bring to a bake sale. We can do entire operating systems that way. It's not that there's no infrastructure, and it's not that there's no organization. It's just that compared to Microsoft or the Encyclopedia Britannica, there's a lot less kind of org charts, weekly meetings, phone directories, and all that other business. And there's a lot more proportionally of each person's time spent just making the thing happen. So if you want to imagine something in the future that I think is at least exemplary of where technology can take us, imagine something on the same order of complexity as an encyclopedia, like building a skyscraper. And you say, all right, I've got this dirt lot. Does anyone have any structural steel or building plans or office furniture or insulation or window glass or whatever, earth-moving equipment? Just bring it on down. We'll kind of mess around 5-10 years, and when we're done, we'll have a skyscraper that will be the best skyscraper ever built, and everyone can have a copy, right? That's a futuristic thing that is actually a nice extrapolation of the kind of stuff that we do now. Not that someday we'll build skyscrapers that way, but someday we will build other things on the same scale of that complexity. Space programs, skyscrapers, whole cities that are organized with more voluntary cooperation and less coordinative effort.
Thank you very much.
Not at all. Thank you.
That was Cory Doctorow talking to us from Vanity Fair and Intelligence Squared's Digital Summit.